Now, as promised, we're going to talk about communication. And that may seem a bit trite, but we communicate all the time. You know, we have more and more ways to communicate besides talking face to face or on a telephone, which used to be what we did, or write a letter. Now we have all these other ways, I would say, to be misunderstood, not just understood, because we misunderstand people and they misunderstand us is a common thing. So we want to talk about communicating better, and the reason being we're talking around something that's very important, and that's boil water advisory communications. And we're going to do a little exercise to develop a plan. It won't be a detailed plan, but in fact it's not a really complex thing that we're going to try to communicate. But if we think about how we are going to communicate, we will do a better job. And that's generally, I think you can say that in life or in work every day or at home. When you think about the implications of what, sometimes we have a really important conversation. We do that. We think about what the other person needs to know and what we want them to understand from us. So here, those are a few things that we think about in terms of planning. So we're going to be more accurate in what we say. We're going to think about who it is we need to talk to. We'll probably be more effective and efficient. It's just going to save us time and trouble generally. So we've come up with a little scenario. Rich may want to talk about it, but a number of you have probably, if you've not experienced this, you can imagine what we are talking about. So it's about a failure of a device. So you're the operator, the chlorine dosing pump has failed, there's no backup in your supply. So you know that the water isn't being chlorinated properly. So in your bunch of materials, you have this thing here, communication planning activity. It's just a couple of pages. It's not going to be complex. And we can talk to you about it. We'll be around. So what we're looking at generally, it's not the W5. You know, we used to say who, what, when, where, why. I would say more why, who, what, when, and then what. We go back to our what. So if you open up the sheet, there's some information in there. There's background. There's your scenario. And on the back page, you'll see that there's the questions that we want you to answer. Feel free to talk among yourselves. And when you're done, when the time's up, we will have a general discussion about these. And I think this is a place there we often learn from one another about things that we hadn't thought about, or we hadn't thought about things in a certain way that it would be useful. So, Rich, how much time?
Yeah, let's do 5 minutes.
5 minutes? And then we'll have the discussion.
So this scenario, as you can see it in your workbook, yeah, you're an operator in a small town. If you're a government official today, trying to put yourself in that scenario, you've got a situation where you go to your treatment building, your pump house, something's wrong. So maybe the chlorination pump has failed, you don't have a backup. So you know that at that point, the water that's going to leave the building is going to not be totally safe. So there's some risk to the community. So what do? What's your next step? Can you answer those questions? It really helps to put yourself in this position at this point in time before you're in that position in reality, in the future down the road. And if you can't come up with the answer, that's okay. That's part of capacity building. You want to find out the solution, what the answers are, and we'll get to that when we discuss. So just 5 minutes, think it through, maybe talk to people. Maybe you've had the same scenario happen before in your community as an operator. What did you do that time? What worked? What didn't work?
Okay. So first question, and we're not going to pick these up. They're not tests. We just want to have a discussion about it. What is the purpose of the communication? Okay. Do we need to tell them anything else, or do we just tell them the water quality is not great right now?
You want to tell them the issue and what's the evaluation?
So what kinds of information do we give them to help them?
Tell them there's no chlorine being entering into the system.
Yeah. So what should they do? Yeah. And then what should the householders do? I heard somebody back there say boil the water.
Boil your drinking water, cooking water, toothbrush water, ice cube water, if you're asleep or what.
Yeah. An important point there is ice cubes, right? They're included. Rich talked earlier about brushing your teeth. These are things sometimes that people forget. There is some standard information, and you've probably got some in your package there from Municipal Affairs and Environment about boil water advisories, and these are posters that are Service NL, sorry, that are posted that give people complete information on what it is they need to do. Because just saying it's a boil water advisory might not be enough. It might be enough for some people, but it might not be enough for everyone. So who are we communicating with? Who's the audience? Public? Yeah, so can we break them down? Are there different types of water users in the community?
General public, workplaces, and public buildings such as hospitals, personal care homes.
Semi-public facilities.
Oh, Dorothea, you're getting an A anyway.
So Dorothea, what were you reading from?
I was reading from the boil water advisory instructions that are also.
Oh, she's cheating anyway.
But it's okay. Like, so we just said she's cheating. But
I'm
in
just
reality,
joking.
of course, joking. But like, that's part of it. Like, the scenario gets introduced in this world because there's not the pressure. So you want to cheat a little bit ahead of hand. And we're not using the word cheating right, maybe. But you want to be able to say, oh, I've got a plan. You know where to go. You've got the answer before you need the answer. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and one of the things we've talked about in some of the other communities, and was particularly a strong theme on the West Coast, because we had people from the Gross Mourne area, you know, from Cowhead to Rocky Harbor and Norris Point and so on. And they were quite aware that they have a tourist population in the summer and cottage population and people that might not be tuned into the regular communications that the municipality offers. So you need to reach those as well. With key message, we already talked about that one a little bit, getting more into the detail of what we need to tell them. So how would you tell them? How do we let people know? Door to door? Yeah. So you're from a smaller community then, I would assume, if you can manage. Okay. Yeah, that's one way of doing it. We have seen that in small communities where they call everybody or they go see everybody, and they make sure that even if people aren't out daily in the community picking up what's going on, that they do hear about it.
Some communities have community billboards.
Billboards? Yeah. Flyers in mailbox. Social media, yeah, we'll get into that one a bit more, but that's a newer, easier one to use.
Comment on the mailbox thing that we learned?
Yes, we heard a story, yeah, about mailbox. It happened in a community that the municipality brought flyers to the post office to distribute, and found out that the post office would not distribute it because the policy was, if it's not addressed to people,
If someone's on the no flyer list.
no flyer list, yes.
They are not supposed to put the flyer in.
Yeah.
Unless it's specifically addressed to the community.
I see someone raise their hand there.
It wasn't consistent across the province.
Yeah, in some communities, just the person in the post office is quite amenable to we'll just send that to everybody, it's important. But in this community, it was a rules person that they hit, so. Yeah. But there's a lesson to be learned there about follow-up, right? find out if it's getting out there.
We have one back here too.
Another
Yes?
thing is to put a notice next to your mailbox in the store or in the post office.
Yes,
So
places that people
way,
go.
That way it sticks out, even if you do take the flyer and toss it. You still have the flyer in the mailbox, but you have it when you go to, you see it right there in front of your face, and also on the doorway coming in and going out in all businesses.
Yeah.
But like one thing I would be interesting on the target audience is depending on the timing of, like, if you discover this at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you got to get it out to your town manager first, I assume, and then get it to I would imagine the councillors, and then to the residents somehow. But you got to get everybody geared up. So town manager would be the person that would be making up these notices, etc. So you would want most people drop in our community about 9:30 to pick up their mail. So you would need all this done prior to 9:30, and the town manager doesn't go to work at 8:30.
Right, and in some communities, the town manager doesn't work every day, or the clerk.
Well, in our case, they do most days.
Yeah, in some they don't though.
Unless they're on vacation.
So timing is important.
Turn the water off for an hour and a half.
Yeah, but
And I'll be calling down home.
but that gentleman just made an important point about other people that need to know. Your town manager, your town councilors. Now, in some cases, the person doing it might be the one person who works for the community, or a person who does volunteer work, and they may be on council as well. But there's also protocols for communications, and then you think about your environmental health officer, right? Is probably a person that needs to know.
Nancy, there was the pilot of text announce through municipal affairs and environment for emergency. Anything else? Would that be something that towns could? Everyone's got a phone.
Possibly. I know some communities were using a system that had been developed by the school boards or Department of Education or something that was sending notices to homes, and you didn't need to be home to get the message. It just left you a recorded voicemail. And some communities were using those for other things as well, like public meetings and other kinds of things. Does anybody from the communities use social media? Yeah.
Facebook.
They does.
Yeah. A lot of people use it personally and in the workplace. It's cost effective. It's easy to change messages when things change, and it's easy to get material out. It spreads quickly, right? So, when do you communicate a message? Gentleman talked about that. And how often? And we'll get back to that as well. So we'll talk about social media now. It's been brought up. We talked a little. And we know that communities are using it. It's being used to send us all kinds of information and market things to us and take information from us. There's all of that. A couple of things to keep in mind is that, especially when we think about communicating in our community, we all have an older population and they're not always clicked into this stuff, right? So there needs to be another plan. It's not the only way. It's possible that someone in their family might get it. It's a younger person, younger meaning probably 60 or younger. I know people in their 70s, they're using it as well, but I don't think it's that prevalent. But they could be missed.
Radio is a good resource.
Yeah, radio. So public service announcements are free. Yeah, you can use that as well. Yeah. Sorry? Mobile signs, yeah, the bright signs, yeah.
I was thinking about, I've seen that, I saw that one on Thorburn Road that was there for a while, a couple years ago, that was useful.
Yeah, we recently were involved in a process with a small community, and I did a survey at the end of a public meeting to say, how did you hear about the meeting? I think Facebook was one, and the sign on the side of the road was two. The ones with the neon letters that you can change. Okay, so the Department of Municipal Affairs and Environment, am I right this time? did a survey this year, and they had 98 responses from municipalities or communities, and they wanted to know how they're using social media. So we can see that they surely are, certainly of the 98 that responded. They were asked about what they use. Has anybody had any experiences they'd like to share with using social media in their community, good or bad? Generally good. We heard an interesting story when we were on this project, when we were in one of the workshops. We started to talk about how social media can be counterproductive. And one gentleman told us that there was some person was widely using social media and saying they wouldn't you couldn't wash your hair with the water and things like this, which was really not helpful. So, it can be problematic.
It's interesting too in Maine, what you were saying, there's 2 languages, right? So
Yes.
they do have their own radio station, which is good, so they can announce it
Yeah.
in both languages.
Yeah, it's an important thing to keep in mind. And in any community, we may have people that are not operating primarily in English, right?
Do you have a question?
Do you mind if I just make a quick comment, just on the social media side?
You're in.
So one of the things about social media, particularly with regards to the use of Facebook, that you've got to be cautious of, is just because somebody has liked your Facebook page, only about 1 to 1.5% of them are actually going to see your post showing up in their feed, because Facebook has a filter that restricts the amount that comes into play. One of the ways to address that is with Facebook groups, which is going to get a much better feed, but more importantly, where things are moving to as a means of communication is through the use of Messenger. Messaging apps get a lot more application and use than social media does, and particularly as a means of communicating out to constituents and issues with that. Messenger does have the ability to do bulk posting out to the people that are connected with you on Messenger, and unlike email, which gets about a 12% open rate, messaging applications get about an 80% open rate within the first 60 minutes of that message going out. So we're seeing in the last 6 to 12 months a massive increase in the use of messaging applications, particularly Messenger, which is number 1, and WhatsApp as far as a means of communicating, rather than simply posting on Facebook pages because of the reduced filtering that comes into play from there. So.
And a good point. In any case, a network has to be built, right? If they're not connected to you somehow, they're not going to get your message.
Lyle, could you introduce yourself? He's our doing the videography today, but he has another job.
Yeah, sorry. I'm also an associate professor of marketing at Memorial University, and my specialty is on digital and social media and doing programs through the Gardner Center through the digital and social media program. So when it comes to the social media side of things, that's where my expertise sort of lies in. So it was just an important part that I wanted just to share with you, and I'll slink back to my background now.
Thank you.
Great. So this one is interesting. It looked at what kinds of information are the communities sending out through social media. So what about drinking water?
Very, very little.
But boil water advisory, they're finding that to be one of the most useful things.
Well, so what are you
What's wrong,
observing?
Dorothea?
What do you see there?
Oh, no, it's just the overall drinking water quality. I would have liked to see that as proselytized about as.
There's probably a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about what you mean so that people can hear?
It's wonderful that there's uptick with regards to identifying boil water advisories and those types of issues, but it would be good as a general background for all community inhabitants to understand what's good about their water quality. So it seems like Rich said, a missed opportunity to use social media, mostly Messenger, to highlight the overall quality of the baseline system rather than just, I mean, relying on it for BWAs is great, but you also want to let people, because, you know, out of sight, out of mind, if it's in the background, people aren't going to be paying attention.
And the province does have easily linkable data for every single community, right?
Yes.
It can always be
Yes.
posted.
I think that was, we saw in the media just last week around communities on the West Coast, the issue of disinfection byproducts. And what I saw through the media a lot of times was the lack of communication on the part of the communities involved. And I think that speaks to your point, Dorothea, that, you know, there's other issues besides boil water advisories that are happening all the time. You know, we have the THMs of the water in communities. And how often are they reminded about that, you know? So there's, again, it's an opportunity that's missed there.
Yeah, and it's also links to the bigger picture in terms of some of the things that came up, probably mostly in under managerial issues, sometimes relate to a lack of general information or awareness about drinking water. Like when we talk about chlorine ruins your laundry. I've heard it ruins your pots, and it gives you colon cancer and all sorts of things too. But there's an opportunity to help people better understand what it is about drinking water that they might care about, and to understand what's happening with a boil water advisory if you get to something in particular.
One thing we struggle with when it comes to social media and stuff is that there is a general distrust with the population, with the city, I could say, as a whole.
Cynical people.
And the people that are on social media a lot are generally naysayers, I guess you could say. And people will trust their word.
People believe it, yeah.
What the city would provide, I guess, right? So that's one thing that would be.
It's another pitfall.
And the other one is like how communities in the city have their own Facebook pages a lot of times, and just like you mentioned, there could be somebody on those groups that will be providing information that may or may not be accurate. And so you get a lot of misinformation all around through social media.
And it spreads just as quickly or probably quicker than
And that's when there's something that's
the less
really
interesting stuff.
That'll get shared over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And we've seen that with the manganese issue that we had this past year in one of the areas about someone that, you know, certain types of issues and have turned into this big whole thing that we had to respond to.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of effort then to combat that, right?
So for you, is it getting the messaging in one voice is difficult as well?
It is. I mean, we do have a communications group, so we have some of those advantages. Like people that,
as a bigger city.
Yeah, and we do kind of have a plan as to what we would do, I guess you could say. But yeah, social media wise, it's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yeah.
So, what is your preferred method of communicating to the city of St. John's as a resident?
Well, when it comes to, I'll just use the manganese as an issue. I mean, we really wanted the mayor to stand up in front and provide the messaging that was there. We did use social media, we used our website, we used the radio. I mean, the media jumped on that one because it was a big story, I guess you could say. So, we really used all types of communication. We also have to educate the people that are receiving phone calls from people. They need to be educated on what kind of answers they need, what information they can provide, all that kind of information. And yeah, I mean, and then our staff, we just have to do a lot of work.
Yeah. Okay, earlier sorry, go ahead, sir.
Not to be self-serving here, but health officers, realistically, should be more of a forefront person rather than, okay, there are all kinds of options for communication, but they are basically the iceberg as the information that they distribute.
Right.
Smaller communities don't.
So they need to know who that person is, how to reach
And
them.
it should, because
Yeah.
typically, health officer is responsible for one geographic area anywhere in the province, so they may have 30 or 40 communities for one particular health officer, or 36, so basically, if you give a distribution across the province, they're covered off. Right?
Yep.
It will be intimate with the, either the town council or the water chairperson, who's, going to be the person who's coordinating the few samples that they got collected. So, they'll love that person.
You're the boots on the ground people.
That's what-
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. Thank you.
They may need to be kind of like the first go-to person.
Okay. Thank you. I've only got one more thing on this, and that's when I said earlier, what again? Looping back. How do you know if your communication has been effective? And how do you know it's not? How would you tell in the community?
Anybody get sick?
Someone gets sick, yeah, you know there's a problem. You're getting a whole lot of phone calls to find out what they need to do, or if there is a boil water advisory, if there's no longer a boil water advisory. Those are kind of clues that perhaps people are not getting the message. And so, you know, you can do a course correction. Okay, oh yeah, we need to tell people, we need to give them more information, we need to tell them again. And there's a reminder on the bottom of the slide there, and that's about, that's a provincial requirement. And I don't know if someone from the province wants to speak to that. Deneen, do you want to speak to that?
Well, Terry's probably the best.
Terry, okay.
Just want to speak to that.
Just if there's a long-term boil water advisory, we need to make it more than one. We send out a reminder there.
Yeah.
Each health officer will send out a reminder there that community.
Okay, so they get a reminder, that's good.
And then
Already.
the town should carry that reminder on to the residents.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, exactly, yeah.
So if you're coming,
The ones that have been on boil water advisory since 1989.
They've been busy.
yeah.
We're not busy.
We're not busy.
Not busy.